We are at our final video of the night. This is video number 4. We are covering strand number 3, emergent writing. So, real quick, emergent writing means beginning writing. We're talking about the very beginning stages of writing. Just like the previous 3 videos, make sure that you have commented and shared your thoughts. If you have not, you can always go back to make sure that you get credit for each one of the 4 videos. So, what are some ways that you can add in more writing opportunities and fine motor experiences for the children you care for? Emergent writing only has one concept. It's kind of a large concept, but it covers writing processes and writing applications. So, just like the last 3 videos, you should probably notice a trend, but kids are going to be engaging in a variety of different writing activities. They're starting to use it to convey meaning, and their writing is progressing, but it's really all about just providing lots of different activities for them to practice the skill, and a lot of different kinds of ways to incorporate writing all throughout your day. So kids are starting to recognize this relationship between the words that are being said and the words that are written. They're starting to understand that they're the same and they can use those written words to convey meaning. They are developing as writers all throughout the day. Like, you want to have this all around them everywhere where they can just pick it up and practice whenever they would like to. So, adding writing opportunities into your dramatic play. Like, if you have a play kitchen, you might want to add in like a clipboard where they can take orders or write the names of the restaurant. There's tons of ways that you can incorporate it to make their dramatic play more realistic and to make their writing experiences more authentic. So, before you should even consider that your kids could write letters, you need to understand that there's a whole process that needs to be laid down. There's got to be a bunch of groundwork done first. So before they're going to get to the point where they can successfully write letters, they have to be able to write and draw shapes. And the most basic shape is that straight vertical line here at 2 years old. And then you notice here at 2.5, now we can start expecting them to do a horizontal line. So there's a big gap between their abilities, their developmentally abilities here to do a vertical line and then to do a horizontal line. And then we progress into a circle. That's at 3 years. And then here at 3.5 to 4 years, they're now taking that vertical and that horizontal line that they had learned a year ago, and they should just now be starting to put the two together to create new form. And these shapes are going to progressively get more complicated for them to draw. So if you look at this letter X here, that is something that is supposed to be, around almost 5 years old, 4 years and 11 months. Now, obviously, some kids are going to get there sooner and some kids will get there later, all, well within the normal range. But it's pretty surprising to think about the fact that at 2, they were able to write a line up and down. And then it took until, 2 years later, when it's a realistic expectation, to have them write these diagonal lines. So I think there's so much to writing that is more complicated than we realize. And I think many of us don't realize that there are so many tiny components that need to be in place before the kids can be successful writers. So, one of the ways you can practice and prepare them to be successful writers is going to be providing tons of different fine motor activities to strengthen up their hands and their fingers, and then also having them practice drawing those shapes. So you can see here, my daughter's probably 4 and she's drawn a train. And if you look at the picture, there are like no diagonal lines at all. So she's got straight lines and horizontal, she's got some circles, but she has not started to utilize any of those diagonal lines or that X shape yet. So technically, she shouldn't be ready quite yet. Now, it probably seems weird to say she's not ready, But I mean, if you can't draw all of the pieces of a letter, you can't draw the whole letter. So that's one of the reasons why all of these shapes are so crucial. Now, in addition to their ability to like just manipulate their writing tool to make those marks on the page, there's an entire process where their brain begins to understand and embrace writing, where it starts to like make sense of it. So in the beginning, it starts as just like a big scribbly, bunch of scribbles on a page. Now, I know this is kind of hard to see here, so I am going to zoom it in closer, and of course, this will be, given to you in your resources as well. So there's this entire sequence that happens as kids are learning to write, and it is you can't skip ahead. You're not going to go from having a kid that's scribbling on the page like this to a child writing letters. There's a whole process that needs to happen between. So it starts as scribbles, and then it moves into this here, which are, this is what they call scribbling, but it looks more like they're starting to attempt to make some shapes that are kind of sort of like letters. And this is kind of that first stage where they're really starting to realize that they can communicate things by writing on a page. Then they get to that wavy, scribbly, fake handwriting, kind of the way you might have shown off your cursive writing before you ever knew how to write cursive. This is one of those things where they're scribble, they make it look like how an adult would quickly sign their name or something. And that's all part of the normal process. So a lot of progression of skills has happened from here to the letter type looking scribbles, and then the scribbly fake handwriting. And then they get to the point where those are much more intentional now. They're definitely starting to do this like invented fake letters. They are making those shapes look kind of like what they think letters look like. Then it gets to letter strings where they're putting them together in big long strings as though they're writing real words. And then it turns into transitional writing where those strings of letters are now being broken up into chunks like the writing of a word. And then it gets to invented and phonetic spelling, so now they're actually like realizing the letter has a sound and I can make a word out of those sounds. I like the dog, or I lick the dog. We don't know. But it is very much, we are able to look at that and kind of pick apart what they're trying to convey. Then they start kind of filling in those blanks, those missing letters, and we're actually getting like the beginnings of words like cat and mom. There's a beginning, the middle, and the end. And after that point, only then are we going to get to that conventional spelling and writing that we expect children to be able to do. So taking a look at this here, these different stages, I mean, you can see there's some circles, and maybe these are supposed to be letters, but a lot of scribbling still, as opposed to where this child is at now, where we can see it's an actual face. There's some eyes, a nose. It looks like he's sad. He's got 2 ears. So this is a big progression between this and this. It is a huge amount of skills have been developed. Same as this right here. 2 different children writing the same word. They wrote gingerbread, and you can see they've kind of got scribblies, and they're in a line. Kind of looks like maybe they're getting ready. But then here we get to this child, and this is more advanced. They're actually starting to make these shapes that are meant to represent letters, as though gingerbread is written above. Now, not just the way that the pencil hits the paper to create those marks, but there's a whole set of skills involved with how they're holding the actual writing tool. There's a big difference between this first step here, where the entire hand is holding the marker and the fingers are wrapped around it, just like choking that marker, as opposed to here where they have that more typical handwriting pose where they're holding it much more delicately with their fingers. So the only way you can get from here, where you're grabbing the whole thing, versus an actual like intentional fingertip grip on the pencil like you would see an older child do. A ton of development and strengthening of those fine motor muscles has happened between here and here. One of the things that we hear in the indicators is using a variety of writing tools. So there's a big difference between writing with a pencil versus a crayon versus a marker versus chalk versus paint versus using your finger. So there's a big variety there, as well as different surfaces that they can write on. Big difference between writing on a piece of paper versus an art easel versus a chalkboard, as opposed to, writing chalk on the ground. So all of those experiences add more skills to their development. And then one of the first things that they're going to be writing are the letters of their own name. Again, just like when it came to reading and learning those letters, it's what's important to them. You're going to see their name, maybe things like mom or dog, but they're starting with what's relevant to them. So they're definitely going to see, you want to see your kids using writing, regardless of what stage they're at. And we want them to be practicing it just like they would in real life. So by adding in opportunities for them to write in their dramatic play area or outside while you're playing, you bring out some art supplies. Those are opportunities where they can practice, and it's all part of the play that they're doing anyway. Now, I do want to point out right here, they're talking about how they're forming letters, but it starts with large or gross motor. So things like sky writing, using their arms to write in the sky, paintbrushes, and water, like up on the walls. And even like sidewalk chalk is still, those are very much full body types of writing that are being done. And then it gets to that more fine motor where their hand is doing all the writing. That's going to be your paper and pencil kind of writing, markers, crayons. So try to vary up the way that they get to experience their writing between things like large motor writing to small motor writing. Lots of different art tools. One of the things we are pretty fond of is just having a big old random collection of stuff and letting them freely create. All of that adds to their fine motor, their fine motor repertoire. Things like cutting paper, that's a huge skill, stamping, pasting, painting. If you got a kid that like tears up pages out of a book, instead of letting him do that, maybe give him some paper that he can safely tear and give him, a way to embrace what he's going to do anyway, but you find a way to let him do it in a healthy way. Now, instead of just destroying books, excuse me, he's ripping up paper so that you guys can use it for art again later. Here we've got some different, like, they're using glue sticks and they're gluing down these little foam shapes. And I gave them their name cards so they could see it while they were going to go ahead and try to write it and decorate these pages. The only thing I asked them to do was to include their name in their artwork. And it is a great way to embrace and kind of hide that literacy, that writing, to kind of hide it in something they like to do already. So we talked about that kid tearing up some paper. This is the kind of stuff you can do with it. There's a big difference between pumpkin number 1 and pumpkin number 2, but they're both fantastic creations, and they developed a lot of fine motor kind of muscle practice there as they were tearing up all the paper, and then they were placing it down and gluing it. And I mean, even the act of picking up a piece of paper like that, you got to pinch your 2 fingers together. That's a skill that they have to develop. So just keep building up those fine motor skills and let them experiment with all kinds of writing and drawing tools. So even my daughter here, I mean, she's probably barely 2. She's using that paintbrush and she's helping glue and decorate some of the boxes we had made. And when I do glue, I always like to do like liquid glue, pour it into a tub, and then I let them use the paintbrushes, because it's just one more way that they can practice that writing, grip but they don't have to actually be writing. They can be using that paintbrush to glue. There's nothing saying that they can't glue or paint with it. We like to do just tons of different things. So look at the different ages here in Olivia. She's very young right here, painting in a tub at the table. And then we've got her, now she's got a marker in her hands. And in the background, you can see sisters holding it differently. She's got a pine cone here that she's painting and gluing and put glitter on. So all of those things are just opportunities for them to practice with these materials. Here's a good one too. When you're outside, you can paint with just plain water and a paintbrush. Kids like doing that, doing it painting on the ground or painting on the walls. We've even done painting on like our climbing our climbing structures that are outside, and like the little Tykes car, the one the big plastic car that they sit in and scoot around with their feet. We used to let them color all over that with chalk, to give it a paint job, and then they'd take it to the car wash and they would use brushes to wash it off. And they loved that. And all the while I'm thinking, yes, they're doing writing practice. They're developing fine motor. Give them opportunities to write outside as well. We have our entire backyard decorated with, writing and drawing all over it. I had written an alphabet line up there, and they would come up and trace the letters. They are free to decorate as much as they'd like, so it's a good way to kind of utilize what you've got around you. So there's a really big difference between, even 6 months of writing. What you see at the beginning versus 6 months later is totally different. And that comes from not only their fine motor muscles getting stronger and getting more used to using them, but also their natural development. You know, 6 months is a lot of time and a lot of changes happen in 6 months. So if they're not quite ready, it's fine. Set it down, give them a couple weeks, come back to it and try again. They're going to be a total different kid, because developmentally they have grown and changed, and now these skills are starting to become more developmentally appropriate. So this looks like just a random activity here, but it actually was specifically for fine motor. They're using like lots of different tongs and tweezers, picking up these puff balls, and then they were sorting them into these trays. And I mean, this cost me literally nothing. And I had, 5 kids engaged all at once. So this is another one that I stumbled upon and absolutely loved it. I always called them porcupines because of this guy right here. But we could do patterning. You could bring it in and do it during snack time. It didn't matter. Now the first girl here, Cora, she absolutely loved this activity. She did it for like an hour, whereas Hadley right here is not having a good time. This was very frustrating for her, and she was not enjoying it. But the difference is there's about 6 months of difference between these two kids. So she's still just coming into it while she's got an extra 6 months of development behind her. So if you find that the child is very oh, they're just not enjoying it and they're shutting down, that's a sign that you need to take a step back and choose something different for them to do. I'm not going to do anything positive by forcing her to keep stacking those Fruit Loops. It's just going to ruin the experience for her. We want them to have positive associations with these kinds of activities. So all these things just kind of look like toys, right? But basically every one of them has a fine motor component to it. So if you look around at the items you've got in your house, they don't necessarily have to be writing or language based. They are things that are still beneficial to the kids. This is why it is so important that kids are playing. Okay, you have to let them play to have these experiences. Oh, this was one that I really enjoyed. I had written their name 3 times for them and then gave them tons of different things that they could use to decorate and create. So there were beans, glitter, stickers, like sand, like a colored sand. There are tons of ways to practice their letters, to practice their writing, than to actually give them a pencil and have them write. Before you ever give them a pencil, you should have them do something like this. I've got just some cookie trays here, and I dumped a bunch of gritty, one of them is sand, like a white sand. The other one was little pinto beans. And then my poor daughter over here, she was the one that got stuck with the cornmeal. And you can see she's not digging it. But then I put their names first and last, and let them use their fingers to do salt, like writing in a salt tray. So this is a way that they're practicing writing that is very developmentally appropriate for them, and it's got a sensory component, which is always good. Lots of name tags here. Again, this is literacy, that I was helping them learn their names and their letters, but the real thing that I was focused on was this clay that I'm having them use. Even things like teaching them to roll the Play-Doh out to make these letters, that's something I didn't realize I was going to have to show them, but sure enough, you do. And you can see there's a difference between how Hadley chose to create her letters versus what Amelia has done, where she's smushing pieces of Play-Doh on it. Depending on the kid, you are probably going to find, some of them really enjoy school type activities and some of them don't. My daughter is the kind that would enjoy something like this. We did this a lot with their names, putting stickers right on them because it gives that fine motor. And I gotta say, man, it was such a shocker the first time I gave them stickers to do this activity. I didn't realize how hard and how challenging it would be. And there were just stickers everywhere. It was like anarchy. 6 months, a year later, then they're starting to produce, what I would call like kind of what I envisioned in my mind. And it's a huge difference. So just because they weren't good at it the first time doesn't mean you shouldn't try it again. All right, so just some of the things I wanted to share with you today, but make sure you comment on this particular video. Share some of the ways you plan to add in more writing opportunities, more fine motor for the kids that you are caring for. And I'd like to mention that in the resources, I'm going to be including Lindsay Brady's training on emergent writing. It was a fantastic training. I learned a ton from it, and it was more in depth. So if you're interested in that, that's going to be available to you as well as this entire training. And of course, if at any time you have questions, feel free to reach out to any one of us. We are all in this together, and we are more than happy to help. So before you take off today, finishing up with the training, please make sure you check out the materials post to find out what you're going to be getting. They are amazing, and I did beg to get them for you. So I hope that you love them and you embrace them as much as my girls did. And I hope that they help make literacy and language a little bit more fun while you guys are out there. So thank you so much. We are all done for the night. Just make sure before you go that you finished the sign-in and 4 videos with comments. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful night. We will see you all soon.